Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's October 4th, 2022, and we have a really important Mormon Stories interview to do today. Today, we are interviewing two brothers-in-law. We're interviewing Chris Lee and Mitch Hadfield. Hey, Chris and Mitch, how you guys doing?
Doing great.
Excellent.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. For those of you who are newer to Mormon Stories podcast, we have a long history of interviewing family members, multiple family members within a single interview. And it's personally one of the most fun and enjoyable types of interviews that we do. It's also one of the most important or impactful types of interviews we do. Whether it's, Donna Showalter with her son, Michael, whether it's Leah, Cody, and Brindley Young, whether it's Paul and Lisa Hacking with their son, whether it's Julie and Jerry Johnson and David and Lori Checketts, the Mike Sells, the Langs, the Whitbecks, or Matt Elgren and Clay Christensen, who were brothers-in-law. Like these are really important episodes, and one of the most important things about these episodes is that it helps people model, number one, how to navigate a faith crisis yourself when you have family and extended family that is believing, but then also, how to support a family member who's going through a faith crisis, and then what happens when two family members discover each other going through a faith crisis. You guys are smiling at each other already. Yep. What happens when two family members who are surrounded by believing family members discover each other and are able to support each other as well and kind of mentor each other? So these are the types of things we'll be talking about today, along with just general faith crisis stuff, mission stuff, BYU stuff, marriage stuff, like all the good stuff. Does that sound right? Chris
all
and
the
Mitch?
things, yeah, all the things.
That's right.
You guys had a comical title for this. What was the comical title?
I think
You
I
get
said,
credit for that.
what
Which is
would I
embarrassing
say?
because I teach English.
Brothers-in-law breaking the Mormon laws. I don't know, something like that.
But that's just a joke. It's just navigating a faith crisis as brothers-in-law and within, surrounded by believing families. So joining us today in studio is my wise and brilliant co-host for, as of late, Margi DeLynn. Hey, Margi.
Hey, babe.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. Yeah.
I'm excited.
How are you feeling?
Good.
Good.
Feeling good. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. Normally what we try and do is kind of parallel, have you both tell your stories in one way or another. And we usually try and start with the person who is more senior than the other person. I think that's you, Chris.
Yeah, I got 10 years on you. So
Yeah.
But before we jump in, I want to give each of you a chance to kind of share your intentions for why you want to do this interview. So why don't we have Chris go, and then Mitch, if he wants to add anything.
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about this because this can be, it can start conversation, right? But you kind of said this before. A lot of people will ask me. I live in a small community in central Utah. They'll ask, so hey, I haven't, what's going on with you? I haven't seen you around at church functions. What's going on? And it's just nice to get this out and to have it on record and to have my 3 daughters listen to this at some point, my spouse listen to this, family members, kind of a controlled long form space and say, oh, I've talked about this actually, check it out. And there might be timestamps even. So you can listen to this and then we can maybe talk more. And I'm hoping that a lot of what I have to say is helpful to people, especially regarding mental health, certain things that I've experienced. I've had conversations with students in the past 10 years at different schools, including BYU, and it's been helpful to share those experiences. I'm like, maybe doing this on a bigger scale would be useful, and I'm hoping that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mitch, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add is that I guess I'm doing this. I really wanted the church to be true. I loved the church, and it was really hard and I found out that, it wasn't what I thought it was. And that's a hard thing to navigate. And so just, I guess, sharing my story through that.
For other people who are going
for
through
other people who are, figuring out the church isn't maybe what they thought it was. Just wanting to share that. And then also for those who are believing to know, I'm not out to destroy the church. It was something that I loved. It was something that I held really close, and it was really hard for me to find out it wasn't what I thought it was and kind of go through that process.
So maybe to help believing family members know how to at least to develop empathy for people
who leave the church, and not see them as someone who's trying to tear down the church, but as someone who's hurting and going through their own process.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. All right, Chris, and we're gonna see if we can do this in one take. We'll either do it in 1 or 2 takes. This won't be an 8-hour marathon. We're gonna try and get this under 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we'll just see where it goes. But maybe 2, maybe 3. I don't know. Let's just see. But Chris, where does your Mormon story begin?
Yeah, well, I think I can help with the timeline on that, because I had a really positive experience growing up in the church. I was born in Provo, and my dad was finishing up a degree at BYU, and then he went to law school. He ended up getting a job in Southern California, so he moved the family down there. Near San Bernardino was a city called Redlands.
Redlands?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a temple there now. It's been there for about 20 years, but it was a great place to grow up. And I might maybe be romanticizing my experience a little bit, but I always feel like this is a stereotype, but a lot of, wards outside of Utah, they seem to have a greater cohesion, I think. Again, I know that's not always the case, but I have positive memories growing up in the church. My dad was always in a leadership position, if I can remember correctly. Great friends, and just a good experience. I didn't have any issues really in the church. I mean, you're a kid, you're not really thinking about doctrine on a deep level, but very social, positive place. And even being in the minority, we still have a lot of members in Southern California, but even being in the minority, it didn't seem to be an issue. I had, the sort of teasing that you hear about if you're in the minority Mormon kid. I didn't really have that. I had a lot of LDS friends, I had a lot of friends who weren't religious. The community I was in, there were actually a lot of different churches all over the place. So there were different kinds of faith everywhere. I really don't have anything negative, but I do have a couple things that I thought of that I did want to share that were foundational, I guess, in kind of me building a testimony in the church. And so one of them, this was probably when I was like 5. It was one of my earliest memories. And it was, I was playing around the side of our house. I think it was before we had landscaped or something. And there were big, tall weeds everywhere and dirt everywhere. And I had this little bouncy ball, and I was just like seeing how high can I get this? Can I go higher? Can I go higher? And of course, I finally hit it to the point where it's gone, right? And I guess I remembered what you're supposed to do when you lose a ball, right? This is like cliche, Mormon youth story, but I pray about it, right? And so I prayed to God that I would find my ball, and it must have been like 2 minutes later, my dad kind of comes out. He's like, "Hey, I found this thing in the weeds," and he gives it to me, right? And so even from a very young age, I thought that immediately worked, right? And that stuck with me. And fast forwarding maybe 5 years, I was at Fish Lake with family. My grandpa, I think his brother owned a cabin up there. And we were, my cousin and I, she's a year older than me. So we were maybe 10, 11 at the time. We had walked down from the cabin to the lake, which we would often do, and then go back up. At some point, we had waited too long. It started getting dark. So we had no clue where we were. We were just kind of wandering around. That it's probably, looking back, wasn't as dire as we thought because we were near other cabins, but we thought like we are lost, right? Like we were 2 little kids lost in the woods. It's dark. This is how people die. This is horrible. So, my cousin, I'll give her credit for this. My cousin thought, well, let's kneel down and let's say a prayer, right? This will work. So we do. and she kind of takes charge. And then we sort of wander to this lodge, or it was like a convenience store that was there. We knock on the back door and we're like, we're lost, like, please help us. And, we go in and they're giving us snacks and they call our parents. But again, like, prayer works, right? And so I had these experiences as a kid that confirmed at least that one thing was true. And this was independent of really any instruction from, my parents, like saying prayer works, right? Prayer works. Like, I just did this stuff. So that, two kind of things that jump out to me. And then the only other thing that I remember that I wanted to say, this kind of challenges the two things that I just said a little bit, but it's a dream that I had. And for some reason, I always remember my dreams, even now, at least for like a couple days later, but this was one I had when I was about 10. And I think it was Ryan Nielsen, who was on the podcast a couple years ago, told his story. It like freaked me out. And I was like, whoa, I remember my dream that I had. And I was in a chapel, an LDS chapel, and it was black and white. And I don't think I've ever dreamed without color before. And I couldn't find my way out of it. I was just like, I need to get home or whatever. Those dreams when you're like stuck at school or something and you can't ever leave. It was kind of like that in this church building. And at some point I leave and then everything's in color. Even a kid, I'm like, it's kind of weird. I don't ever recall having a dream like that. So, I didn't give it much stock at the time because I was young, but now, looking back, it is something unique about that psychologically. I'm not going to do a deep dive into my old self, but those are just some things I thought of in my generally positive experience. Youth conference was good. I had amazing friends in the church. So I don't have any, and I should probably acknowledge too, I thought about this before we're doing this interview. I get why I would have a positive experience, just acknowledging being a straight upper middle class, like white cis guy. That's not surprising. So I don't want to ignore that fact. But having said that, I did have a very positive experience growing up in Mormonism.
And as you, how would you characterize your family's brand of Mormonism?
Yeah. Okay. So maybe one way to describe this, Sundays were, we honored the Sabbath. We weren't playing with friends. We weren't, swimming was like a total no-no. And I know that a lot of non-Mormon listeners, but swimming is like at least when I grew up, it was a big no-no. Is that
For some
still
families.
the thing?
In the Doctrine and Covenants, which is Mormon scripture, it says that Satan has control over the waters. So missionaries aren't allowed to swim.
Yeah.
And there's just a general, but also Mormons swim. So it's kind of a weird dichotomy.
On Sundays, I guess God's like, hey, it's your day, I guess, I don't think we really stayed in our Sunday clothes. I haven't really remember any of that, but, so there were things that we would really consistently do. Like we would try family evening, but we'd often end up just kind of annoying each other and fighting. And then that would go away for a while. We do scripture study when it would go away. So I think that was pretty typical growing up. But I joke that anybody my age, especially if they're LES, I can learn a lot about their childhood with this one question. Did your parents let you watch The Simpsons? And yes, and I had a TV in my room and I was watching Simpsons and X-Files. This dates me, but in my little TV in my room. And so what I'm trying to suggest with that is we were very active, but I'm trying to avoid labels, but I don't think we were
not super
extreme.
Orthodox. You're not super Orthodox.
I don't know. I think we were. I mean, my dad was always on the High Council and bishoprics. We did seminary. We did all the things.
Okay, maybe not super orthoprax.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe if we qualify it with like super. I'm trying to avoid the word fundamentalist because that's a totally different thing. But
in Mormon context.
Yeah, I know. So
but not super harsh and strict.
Yeah, no. I don't think there was any of that, especially in my experience. I'm the oldest, so maybe my younger siblings. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and there's 4 years between each of us. So there's a pretty big gap.
You're the oldest of three.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So part of it was just, I imagine my experience is different in that my parents are, let's try this. And then it's like, oh, that didn't go super well. Let's fix it with our other, the two younger ones. but I didn't have a huge rebellious streak. I look back now, I'm like, I was a pretty good kid. I think that was the case. I was a normal person, you know, but I had good friends. So yeah, we were very active, and my dad at his law firm, I think everyone knew he was LDS, and I think he was respected for it. I think he was not ashamed of any of this. But The Simpsons, right? I mean, that rooted us in, I think, a normal, like, American middle class existence in the 90s. So
Simpsons is Mormon edgy.
Well, I know. Yeah.
It's like Coke, Simpsons, PG-13 / R-rated movies. You know, that's sketchy. I'm being a little bit silly.
Yeah. So that I probably would have resented now if we had a very strict, you know, LDS upbringing. I don't feel that was the case.
Yeah. No, it just sounds like it wasn't harsh and super strict. Yeah. Okay. And as you're, let's just say in your high school years, and we're always taught we can't live on borrowed light, that we have to gain a testimony of our own. You shared a few mini miracles that you experienced as a kid, but once you get into high school and seminary and you start being taught kind of the church's theology and doctrine, and you know that a mission and or temple marriage might be looming, you got to kind of think through that sometimes. How is that for you, or not? Maybe not.
Well, you're actually making me think of an experience in a youth conference I kind of forgot about, but I think for the most part I was
Tell it.
Yeah, you kind of just, all your friends at that age are doing these youth conference activities, and I mean, we grew up in Southern California, so we were doing. I moved to Utah. I'm like, oh, Lagoon, like, cool. I feel bad for you guys. Like, we had all the stuff. This was even SeaWorld. Like, we had that was a thing. That dates me again. But we were at a youth conference, and it was the kind of after, activity testimony meeting. And, I remember a lot of people getting up and they're crying and they're like bearing this, very heartfelt, I would imagine, very honest, genuine testimony. And they're using the no word, right? Like, I know that this is true. And because, it's a cultural thing you pick up on. I remember sitting there kind of thinking, like, I don't not believe, but like, where is this stuff coming from? I'm not feeling this, like, the things that I'm supposed to necessarily. And I didn't discount it as like, that's the moment. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm kind of looking around, like, does anyone have a dry eye? Is it just me? And when you feel like you are kind of in the minority, you start to think that it's you, right? And so I got up and I walk up there, and I was probably 15, maybe. I don't remember what age I was, and I just did the thing, and I kind of felt like I did. I'm trying to use my words carefully. Like, I either received the feelings or they were manufactured, right? I think there's different ways to interpret that, but they were real. And I'm like looking out over the audience, and I'm like, oh, you just have to do it, right? And of course, that's often what we're taught, is the testimony is found in the bearing of it, right? And so I thought, oh, that's another kind of true principle. So it was an initial kind of, I'm not fitting here. Well, just sort of do it. Okay, it worked. And that's a theme that just ramped up and up and up. And we'll talk about it on the mission, where it really, like, blew up. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So as you think about kind of graduating from high school and preparing for a mission, do you feel like you kind of covered the main things you wanted to cover? Is there anything else you want to cover before we switch to kind of mission prep and mission?
I don't think so. I wanted to go. I was excited to go. I did do 1 year of school at Snow College before the mission. So this is like pre-age change. Yeah, 19. Yeah.
You're old like me, basically.
Yeah. You got my Simpsons reference. It's still on, I think. So I think you're good. But maybe I'll just add that real quick. Going to Snow College really sort of your commitment to the church gels, because at the time it was probably like 99% LDS, and the 1% was probably the football team. I'm kind of kidding, but that actually might be a true statistic. And so when you see other people who, they don't have to go. I mean, I guess I wasn't totally naive to, like, there's clearly social pressure to do what everyone's doing, but there's no parents telling you what to do. It's not like there's, these authority figures that aren't really getting in your business. Right. And so that I think helped too, that, it's kind of nice to not have like, go do this and go to this. You have to go to seminary at 5:30 or 6 a.m. And so that probably kind of strengthened my commitment. And I didn't feel like I was missing out. It's all I knew. I wasn't at some party school. I'm like, man, I wish I could be doing what they're doing. So it just felt natural. It felt good. I made amazing friends. I still have friends from, this was 2001, from my freshman year. So that just strengthened of course I want to go on a mission. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the BYUs on Mormon Stories, but I don't think our non-Utah or non-Mormon listeners might know much about Snow.
Yeah.
Do you want to give like the 1 minute overview of where and what Snow College is?
Yeah. And I'm smiling because I'm trying not to do a 20-minute recruitment video because I love Snow College.
Oh, you work there now?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that a secret? Were you not supposed to?
No. Shut it down. We got to start over. No. That's part of my story is I love that place. My dad actually grew up in Ephraim, which is where it is. So in central Utah, there's a 2-year residential college, which becomes more and more unique because that's usually 2 years as a commuter, community college. So Snow has athletics, there's a football team. Again, it's residential. So it's a unique place in that people from like Salt Lake or Logan or Provo, these more urban areas on the Wasatch Front in Utah, will move down to central Utah. It is literally almost exactly in there's a coordinate that you do a hike that's right in the center of the state. Wow, that makes it sound really boring down there. But it's a unique place because people move down there to kind of have this small town experience with small class sizes. I feel like I'm doing a commercial now. So I loved it there because I had family experiences with my grandma, my grandpa. My grandfather owned a store in Ephraim. It was a little variety store. I know I'm backtracking, but going there was always an option. Like, well, a lot of my friends are either going on missions because I was always the youngest in my age group. My dad, when I was going into kindergarten, it was like, hey, we need to send him to school. And they're like, oh, the deadline changed. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like he's going to go to kindergarten. Right. So you're like lawyered my way in, I guess, anyway. So, yeah, it was always an option of maybe what if I go to Snow, and I wasn't escaping anything. I liked all my friends, but I thought maybe I'll do something different. So yeah, I loved it there.
How does Ephraim compare to Provo or Rexburg? We've talked a lot about Provo and Rexburg. How does Ephraim or Logan, if you even could compare? I'm just curious.
Well, I went to USU, so and I've taught at BYU. Let's see, I have comparison points.
Is there anything meaningful? We don't have to force the comparison.
Do you mean like in terms of the religious culture?
Anything notable? Okay,
it's unlike BYU in that it's super tiny, so it's really easy to make connections. BYU, and I also had a stint at BYU. I don't know if that's going to come up here or not, but I was there for a month as a student. But, you go like a week without seeing anybody and that does not happen down at Snow. When I was there were maybe 2,500 students total. My high school almost, I feel like, was bigger than that. So as far as it being smaller, right, but it's also very rural. So there's not much down there. I mean, the landmark that people might be familiar with is probably the Manti Temple, which is 5 minutes south, which was part of the experience, right? Like I'd have a friend, Aaron Gale, who would like knock on my window. I lived with my grandpa my I guess it was my second year, but he would just be like in his temple clothes, like, we're going to go. And I'm like, I'm just waking up, but okay. And we would like drive to the temple and do a session. So, yeah. Sometimes there's a label of, it's mini BYU. I don't think so. I don't know if this is making sense, this comparison, but I didn't feel that social pressure. Like, are you going on the mission as much as I've heard of at BYU? I'm sure it was there, but
it was there.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've heard lots of stories about kind of kooky, kind of polygamous types around Manti.
Yeah.
like people, apostate groups, fundamentalist apostate groups that are like doing temple ceremonies outside of the Manti temple, but around the Manti temple.
Well, we didn't have anything to do. Like, what else are we going to do? You know? So, no, I think I get what you mean. Like,
Is that true?
Yes.
And there was the Manti pageant.
Yeah.
Right? Which has been canceled.
Rest in peace, right? I think since 2018. But no, you're right about that. But here's, I guess, my experience was when you're at school there, because it's a residential campus, there's just kind of not much you think about out. This is going to sound like it's boring, really, but there's the campus and there's kind of the Walmart, and that's like every student life is on the campus, and there's a couple hikes and there's things to do outdoors and stuff, but that stuff didn't really filter in to the experience in my experience, other than like, oh, we're at Walmart and why are they dressed like Pioneer? Oh, and someone will like tell you, right? So there's that. That there's polygamists, adherents, I guess, down there
around it.
Yeah. Manti, I think some places north.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. And it's not snow because it's particularly snowy, right?
Nope. No, it is named after a prominent LDS prophet.
Lorenzo Snow, right?
And his brother, Erastus.
Okay.
Yeah. 1888, I think. I'm like trying to prove my.
Why is it the
knowledge.
Badgers?
Huh?
Is Erastus Snow the equivalent of Jedediah Springfield, basically?
Oh, I like that. And you know what? There's actually in the little.
That's a Simpsons reference.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for that.
We should do more of that. Yeah. There's
It's going to be a running theme. Simpsons is going to be a running theme.
The golden
All
years.
the jokes are going to be Simpson.
Yeah. When in the 90s. Past that, I kind of checked out. But there's a statue though in the middle of campus where it's. I call him Rasty. I hope that's okay. But Rasty and Lorenzo are like pointing at the oldest building on campus, and you're like, what are they pointing at? But it does kind of remind me of the.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so that kind of takes us up to right before your mission.
Yeah.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's pause. And Mitch, let's jump to you. Even though you're 10 years Chris's junior.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
Let's go ahead and do your Mormon story up through kind of pre-mission.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Ping pong variety back and forth.
Great.
All right.
Yeah. So I was born in American Fork City. I'm the oldest of 4 children. I have 3 younger sisters. But before I can really remember anything, my dad was in the military, and we moved to suburbs of D.C. where he worked at the Pentagon.
Ooh.
So that's kind of as early as I remember. Virginia, yeah. I mean, we started out in downtown D.C. in apartments. That's kind of early as I remember. And then kind of before kindergarten, we bought a home in the suburbs in Virginia, and my dad would commute. But that's kind of...
Which ward? Do you know?
We're in the Rolling Valley ward in Springfield, Virginia.
Okay.
So I think the boundaries have changed by now, but yeah. So that's kind of where I grew up, and a little bit of a unique military experience. I didn't move from that time until I went on a mission when I was 19. My father got deployed a couple times to war zones, Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, things like that. But we never had to up and move our family. He would always, go and do his thing, and then eventually he'd come back. So that kind of sets the tone of kind of how I grew up a little bit military-wise. My mom, a lot of times she would kind of do things on her own with us just because my dad would be gone, work long hours. He's in skiffs, unreachables for long periods of time. So yeah, I grew up, I would say in a very believing home. My dad wasn't very strict, which was interesting being in the military. He was always more lax. My mother was more strict, and maybe that just came from having to do things on our own a lot with 4 of us kids. But a believing household, not as orthodox as some. We watched sports on Sundays. We played sports on Sundays. That was really some of the only time I got to spend with my dad. So we'd, play football or basketball, things like that. But we always went to church. We'd try family scripture study. We'd have a couple months. We did it in the mornings, then not do it for a while, then do it again. We did family night. That always ended up kind of being the most contentious hour of the week until it was like, okay, let's just eat dessert. So, but my parents tried there, and we did the normal Mormon stuff. I was growing up in sports a lot. I played basketball. I'm fairly
tall.
I'm fairly tall.
kinda
Yeah,
tall.
yeah. You're very tall too.
I
That
mean,
was interesting.
tall-ish.
Yeah, 6'5".
Yeah, that's
So not-
tallish.
Yeah, for high school sports.
I'm
you
being
know?
a pill. I'm just
Yeah. So I wouldn't do any like the Mormon summer camps because I'd be at a basketball camp or something like that. But normal stuff. Church on Sundays, early morning seminary. I was really into early morning seminary. My first year was the Old Testament. Really excited.
Mine too. My
Got
first
up. Yeah.
seminary year was Old Testament.
Had a great teacher who was, kind of made it fun for the kids. And as I went on in high school, I got less interested in seminary, a little more interested in sports, got more tired. But something interesting in my growing up was my family, while believing, wasn't ultra Orthodox, but kind of as I grew up in the church, I became kind of ultra Orthodox. And I would kind of view my family at times through a negative light,
The slackers.
why aren't we reading our scriptures more as a family? Why aren't we staying in our Sunday clothes? Why are we watching sports on Sunday? Why are we watching these PG-13, movies? We didn't really have any stipulations on what movies we could watch. Maybe we didn't watch rated R, but my parents had some, and Band of Brothers, things like that, war movies. But it kind of did set up a little bit of dynamic against my family at times because like we'd go on vacations and my family would be like, yeah, we're not going to go to church because we're on vacation. And I'd ask them to bring me to a church building, drop me off, and I'd go to church and then I'd come back and they'd go swimming and I'd just kind of stay in the hotel. So it's kind of interesting looking back, kind of seeing the dynamic that played out. Some of that was before my mission, kind of being going the more Orthodox route, being a very literal believer. It says we have to honor the Sabbath day, read some old talks. What does it say? Okay, that's what I need to do, even if my family doesn't, type thing. So
Do you remember kind of when that started emerging in you, that change of becoming a bit more Orthodox?
I would think probably around high school time frame. Kind of before that, I just went to church, hung out with friends. But kind of when high school came, I started to try to read the Book of Mormon more, take notes in it, started to read like the Preach My Gospel and other things like that. Started thinking a little bit more for myself. I think everybody at that time period becomes a little more distrustful of their parents, trying to figure out what works for them. And so, just listening to conference talks or going to church, bringing home ideas and being like, hey, this doesn't necessarily square with everything we're doing. Yeah, we're doing a lot of it, but so.
Yeah, interesting, because in your way, that was your differentiation, right? Like the teen
That's right.
individuation, little differentiation there. Do you remember, like, if you were to think back to those years, do you remember, it's okay if not too, if there was a particular drive or what you remember kind of feeling behind that sort of desire to get more serious or to live it more deeply or do you remember anything about that?
Yeah. I mean, I remember I've always been very gung-ho and want to do everything 100%. And so I think kind of around those years, I feel like I gained, what some would call their own testimony, feeling like it's true, reading, praying, things like that. I was a very emotional child, kind of opposite of Chris. I'd stand up and bear my testimony and cry on Sundays. And, the feelings were very real and kind of had a deep emotional experience that way. And so I think I decided from that age I was going to be all in and kind of do everything I could to, live the gospel, in any way I could, anything I could add, anything I could learn. I was, excited about it. Anyway, my family a lot of times was accommodating, but sometimes it did kind of bring up contention there.
Meaning your orthodoxy or your orthopraxy would upset your parents or siblings?
It would. So, for instance, I remember my sisters really loved the movie Pitch Perfect. And they wanted me, watch it with them, and they were like, "This movie's awesome," and I'd be like, "No, it has some swearing," or I don't remember, that movie specifically, but maybe there were things in it. Maybe it was PG-13, and things I was maybe uncomfortable with at the time.
Maybe it was a little bit too LGBT affirming.
It could be, yeah. And I would push back, on my sisters and be like, this is bad. You shouldn't watch this. Like, this is, things like that. So.
Yeah.
Can I ask one other question?
Please do.
One question, I don't know if it's too personal or not, but just curious, in your kind of psychology growing up and the fact that your dad, it sounds like, was deployed to some places where there was danger. Do you have memory of feeling fear for your dad?
I do. I have several, but I remember at one point my dad was in Iraq for 18 months, and we were in Virginia at the time, and news came out about some American servicemen being killed in the streets in Iraq by, I don't know who did it, but kind of in a demonstration. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table, just in middle school at the time, and just crying and, wondering, will I ever see my dad again, type thing. Yeah. So I do have a lot of memories of that. And my dad, I think, was also, he'd bring up humor before he went to different war zones, and he'd talk about, I remember this vividly, but he'd always say, like, I think I'm going to die in war. I'm going to die in war. He'd say things like that. And I think it was more to help himself, with the fear, because I'm sure, as a service member, you go through things like that, but it was hard to hear as a kid. And I remember just, not knowing if it was like a prompting of his or something like that, thinking maybe he will die in war. So it was scary as a kid growing up.
I can imagine that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you're thinking this, Margi, but I'm wondering if maybe some of your religiosity, maybe it was tied to fears about your dad and or hopes that if you are religious enough, it'll keep your dad safe. I don't mean to project that.
No, yeah. I always did have a strong desire for my family, I guess, to be together and to everybody do everything right so we could be together. That was I guess, a promise that I did latch on to. I mean, I think for a long time, even into, marriage years, but yeah, I would agree.
That so makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And that, and really feeling, it sounds like from a relatively young age where many children live in a bubble, more of a protection space to be children, to really have this firsthand experience of danger, real danger in the world, and trying to kind of seek control and protection where you can when you're still kind of, in a child role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of even remember one other early memory. I was in third grade, and when the Twin Towers were hit and the Pentagon was hit, my dad was working at the Pentagon at the time. And, he happened to be, and he didn't work in the area where it was hit, but I didn't know where in the Pentagon he worked at the time.
Wait, he was in the Pentagon when the plane...
Well, he was on a business trip for a couple days,
okay, sorry.
But, I knew he worked at the Pentagon. I was young. I didn't really understand what was happening, but I just saw the Pentagon being hit, and I was immediately just didn't know, as a third grader, I came home and my mom put on the video of the towers and the Pentagon being hit. And I just remember immediately feeling fear, but then also he was out of town for the couple days. But yeah, that was something I did live with as a child growing up. So,
yeah, I've wanted, I guess we did Kelly Lang talking about military service, but I don't think I've covered that quite enough. So if there are maybe another Mormon couple or two, post-Mormon couple or two that have dealt with military service, I think that's an area we need to cover a little bit more, because the sacrifices made both by the parents and the children in military service, and then from a Mormon angle.
That's right.
That's an important story. Yeah.
So true.
Well, I want to thank your family for your dad's service,
Yeah.
even though he's not here to hear. All right. Okay. So your Mormon intensity was at 11 compared to your family members, but they were still devout. So.
Yeah, they were still devout, went to church, did kind of everything they were supposed to, I guess, but maybe not through my eyes. I always thought, there's more we can do. There's more they should do.
Basically, you're Nephi.
Kind of, yeah. And that's kind of how I viewed it a lot of the times. It was like, I'm keeping this together. I'm, kind of running this, making sure everything happens.
You had some literary, scriptural support of identity.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Nephi was insufferable, wasn't he?
That's right.
Okay.
Beheading joke. Just kidding.
What's that?
Nothing.
Oh, I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to Nephi, but I think even within Mormon circles, there's kind of a joke that Nephi was a little bit too intense, maybe sometimes. Maybe a little prideful. Maybe
I could see that.
a little bit. Okay. So anything you want to share about high school or pre-mission
Yeah.
that's really fundamental to your testimony or your Mormon story? Anything?
I guess just a couple things. In high school, I always felt like I didn't really fit in at church. So I did a lot of sports, like I said, and then I was very kind of devout in my eyes. And in high school, I didn't feel like I really fit in anywhere. At school, I kind of felt like a little bit of an outcast in my mind. I had a lot of friends, in the sporting community and, through other classes and things, but I always feel like I didn't quite fit in because I was Mormon. There were things I couldn't do. And then at church, I felt like I was kind of looked down upon. I don't know if this was in my mind or if it was real, but hey, he's like a little edgy. He's doing all this, he's with sports. He's with people who are outside the church. Type deal. And I felt like I didn't really fit in a lot. And that was kind of hard for me. I didn't feel like I really had a home in high school as far as like peer groups go. But I did have a lot of friends from a lot of different backgrounds growing up in DC. My basketball team, we had, some Muslims, just a big diversity, which was great. And I think really helped me, be okay with diversity and learn to love people who are different than me, while still like believing that the church was the only true church and that eventually like everyone would have to accept it.
Did you have any favorite basketball role models?
Oh, actually I was really quick. I did play church ball for a little bit, but I was kicked out of playing church ball for swearing, which is kind of a funny story.
But Nephi would never swear during church ball.
He wouldn't. No.
I love it. We just have we had some interest.
Yeah.
You just turned into
here.
Sam, man.
Some character interest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some intrigue.
Yeah.
So-
Do tell us.
What's the word?
Yeah, so it was funny. I would at my the high school basketball team I'd play, I got a technical foul called on me for swearing, but it wasn't me, it was somebody else. And one of my teammates came to my side and was like, he would never swear, he's a Mormon, told the ref and anyway. And then I swore and got kicked out of church ball. So it's kind of the dynamic I felt growing up.
Church ball can push someone to their limits.
Those poor refs, they never were trained. They didn't know. So
I found church ball to be much more violent than
than regular basketball.
Varsity,
It was.
Exactly.
basketball.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, when I was in Logan,
I would agree.
we won area a few years in a row, and we played some of those Southern Idaho teams.
Oh,
where
dang.
they wanted to meet us in the parking lot after and fight.
Yeah.
They had to call one of the games and end it early because it got so violent. And I don't think it was us. you know.
Yeah, I was not kidding.
You were there?
Church ball
Yeah.
can push people to.
Yeah, that's right. To certain limits.
Yeah. So who's your basketball role model?
Oh, my bad. I always really liked Dirk Nowitzki. I grew up in a German immersion program, so I thought Dirk was awesome.
So Dirk was to your era as Larry Bird was to mine. Kinda
Gotcha.
like and I hate to say this, but like the white guy that the white guys could respect a little bit.
I liked him because he always looked awkward. He wasn't coordinated. I was never super coordinated, but I could always shoot, and he shot very well, and just always went in. So
And to be clear, I loved Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and Charles Barkley and all the others as well. But I did feel a special kin to Larry Bird and you to Dirk.
Yep, that's right.
Which means you probably like, who's the guy that plays for Dallas now?
Luka Doncic.
Luka?
Yeah,
Are you a Luka
I like
fan?
LeBron.
You like LeBron?
I'm kind of a bandwagoner.
You're breaking from the white boy love and you're going for LeBron.
Yep.
All right.
Oh dear.
I know. It's just the psychology of the time you want a role model, and sometimes you pick people who look like you. Sometimes you don't, but sometimes you do. Or maybe that had nothing to do with it. Maybe I'm projecting.
Because he's short.
What's that?
Stockton was short, so I got that.
Oh, okay. You like Stockton.
Stockton Malone
Okay.
days.
All right. So anything else about high school? Or
Yeah, so I guess my dad wanted me to go to the military academy coming out of high school, going into college. And so I started that application, but I didn't, I've never really wanted to be in the military. Harm has always scared me. So I only applied to a handful of places. One was George Mason, which was right by my house, which I got into. I didn't finish the military application, but I applied to BYU and BYU-Idaho. Then you had to have an interview with your bishop. And I had a lot of friends who got into BYU Provo, and I didn't get in. And I had the suspicion, it could have been my grades. I had really good grades, I think, at the time. And I was in a lot of extracurriculars. So I kind of blamed my bishop for, whatever he put on the application. But I ended up getting into BYU-Idaho. So that's where I went.
Bishop put swore in church ball.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So you got relegated to BYU-Idaho.
That's right. So that was really, I wanted to leave home. I didn't want to stay at home and go to George Mason. I didn't want to put in the application in the military academy. And BYU-Idaho was really my only option other than that. I didn't prepare very much for college in the sense of applying to a lot of different places. So I ended up going to BYU-Idaho for a year before I went on a mission.
Okay. And around what year was that?
That would have been 2011.
Okay.
Yep. So
right.
I was up in Rexburg.
Yeah. Okay. And how was BYU-Idaho pre-mission?
It was okay. I did, socially, I didn't feel like I totally fit in. I would try to go to like some dances and things, and I was taller, so I've danced with some of the taller girls, and they'd talk to me and, be excited and friendly, and they would ask, where do you serve your mission? And I would say, I haven't gone on one yet. I'm planning on going soon. And then immediately all the excitement would kind of drop from their face. And finish the dance, and I wouldn't talk to them again. I spent a lot of time up there. They have what's called the I Center, and it's just like 10 basketball courts. So if I wasn't studying, I was just, exercising or playing basketball. There's always people, just playing a game or something, and that really helped me kind of make it through up there. If you haven't been there, there's really not a lot, or there wasn't at the time, a Walmart, the college, the temple, and the high school, and that was kind of seemed like that was it. So
similar to Ephraim.
That's right.
We got the Walmart.
Oh, yeah,
there
better
was a
than
Walmart up there as well.
Oh, you got one finally?
There was, yeah, and a
They
Brolins.
caught up eventually.
Yeah.
Okay. It was behind Ephraim. Rexburg was behind Ephraim.
Which probably never happened ever.
As signified by a Walmart.
Yeah.
I love it. So you're kind of a gym rat. Did you do intramural?
I did intramural basketball.
Yeah, I relate to that.
Things like that. And interestingly, the other dynamic too, kind of going into that time, was there would be times where I would kind of transition from being very orthodox into thinking, hey, the church isn't true. And I would kind of taunt my mother and say, hey, I don't believe in the church. I'm not going on a mission. And that would kind of make her really upset. Anyway, so about that time, I kind of decided, hey, maybe I will go on one. And anyway.
What was it that really pushed you and nudged you in the direction of a mission?
I didn't really have a plan for myself. I didn't know what I wanted to study. It was an expectation. My dad went on one. He shared some positive experiences with me, how it, he went to Korea and he learned Korean, and that's kind of what set him off on his career path in the military. And so, I felt like I didn't have a plan. It was something to do. My family really wanted me to do one, and it kind of would have been a disappointment otherwise. They told me they were willing to pay for it.
Maybe I missed this, but if you're Nephi, if you're the strict one nudging your family along, why wasn't a mission just an absolute, I'm doing it? Mm-hmm. Was it a lack of a firm testimony? What was it if you were Nephi?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, my mother was very, very strict. And so I would try to, do things to kind of exert like I'm my own person.
Okay.
And so a lot of times it was a way to kind of show her, hey, like I can do my own thing.
Okay.
So
ultimately, was there like some culminating event that pushed you over the top to go on a mission, some spiritual or emotional experience or?
No, not really.
Okay.
It just kind of happened in a natural progression of, going to BYU-Idaho, everyone around you is going on a mission. It's kind of what you're expected to do. And then also the feelings of being super orthodox, wanting to, do what I'm supposed to.
But it almost sounds like broccoli.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you were dying to go. It's like, I got to eat broccoli because it's healthy. Is that right or not?
Yeah, I wasn't.
Was there cheese on the broccoli?
Yeah.
No, plain.
Because it might have. Oh gosh.
Just kidding. Yeah, I think kind of a combo of everything. I think I got more excited after I got a call and things like that, but kind of leading up to it was more to kind of make my family feel good. And I also wanted to feel like I was doing all the boxes.
Yeah.
I have a question for both of you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like for both of you, for your first year of college, moved from a place where it was not predominantly Mormon to now an experience where the majority of people, I actually don't know if that's true of Snow.
Yeah.
It is true.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Where it is predominantly Mormon. What was that experience and change like for you? And things you liked, things that, did it feel hard? Did it feel great to have sort of that sense of support?
So, I think it did. I remember actually the first time I went home, or maybe it wasn't the first time, but one of the times I went home for a Christmas vacation or something. My dad picks me up from, I think it was Long Beach Airport. We're driving home and I'm like, just kind of looking around at all the cars and the drivers. And I'm like, started to just notice a pattern that for some reason never stood out to me. And I said, Dad, I don't think I've seen a white person on the freeway, for like 10 miles. And he's like, okay, and it's not like I didn't see race as a kid or something, but I just didn't really notice. I'm like, wow, it's like 99% LDS white, like middle class. And I didn't really notice that for some reason. I had a lot of friends who were different religions, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds.
In high school.
Yeah. Some were LDS, some weren't. And so I think initially it was awesome, right? Because everyone has the same values. And again, I wasn't really picked on for being Mormon or anything in high school, but I think after a while, you start noticing the cultural things, right? And this is pretty typical if someone's from like an out of state LDS person, right? They'll be like, why are people looking at me weird? Oh, I have like a colored shirt on at church, right? So you start noticing things that like that wasn't a thing where I was from. Like, that's a Utah thing. And it actually becomes kind of a point of pride.
Yeah.
In fact, when my wife and I met our first day, we spent all night talking. That was like a huge part of our conversation was just like, and another thing about Utah Mormons, we like totally connected over how much better we are, Anyway, yeah. So I think initially it was awesome. And then you start seeing cultural differences. And then I think it kind of became a point of pride. Like, oh, I like Mormon for real because this is all stereotypical, right? But I do it for like these actual real reasons, not because, whatever this cultural stuff's getting all up in the way. So I think that's kind of how I remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. I was raised in Texas as a Mormon and I thought non-Utah Mormons were the real Mormons.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Utah Mormons were they were Mormons by force.
Me too.
Not Mormons by choice.
Yeah. I was in Florida in high school and I remember it's a fundamentally different thing to be different. Like grow up and you're kind of the different, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, everyone's kind of the same. Yeah. And now I'm part
and you
of
like the difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably what it was for me was I tried Mexican food in Ephraim, and they're like, no, the church isn't true here if they think this is real Mexican food. Just downhill from there.
Mitch, what's your answer to Margi's question?
I think for me, it was a little bit of an orthodoxy driver at BYU-Idaho. Sundays were very different. Nobody really went anywhere, did anything, kind of stayed in your church clothes. A lot of people, not everybody, but I kind of picked up on the cultural don't touch homework on Sundays. Kind of it became a little bit more of like a set apart day for me. And then also I really took to home teaching, back when it was home teaching, but I'm going to really take care of the people I'm assigned and, do it every month. And I kind of became like a upstanding home teacher. So maybe a little bit of a driver of orthodoxy. And then, I enjoyed it at the time.
Got it. Okay. So we got you both to pre-mission. And again, where were you called, Mitch?
Again? I was called to the Kiev, Ukraine mission.
Oh.
Yeah. Ukraine. So I was there, kind of in the middle of when Crimea was taken. That was toward the second half of my mission, but I guess we can get into that in a little bit.
Ukraine.
Yep, Ukraine.
And remind me, Chris, I've already forgotten where you got called. If you
I don't think I said. I got called to Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
It's a liberal area.
Fun.
I know. Yeah. So this was 2002.
And Chris, was your mission the first time you started having serious doubts about the church? Or?
It wasn't even doubts about the church. It was the first time I think I started really kind of drilling down into like, there's something wrong with me in the church.
Well, let's jump to it.
Yeah.
I mean, Mitch, unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
Oh, that's great. Let's do it.
Okay, so now we're jumping back to Chris.
Yeah, so summer.
Chris's mission.
Yeah, fun stuff. There, I get my call probably sometime in the summer after my first year at Snow. Super excited. I remember watching documentaries about, the Big Dig and all these things about the Boston metro area, like just prepping for all this cool cultural history. I was considering majoring in history and I loved history. So the prep was exciting, and I was on the tail end of, most of my friends were already out. Some of them were already actually back. So it kind of exciting to see them come back and have positive experiences. And when it came time to go, it's actually been 20 years. It's kind of like a weird anniversary. I think to the month I was out in the MTC in 2002. And so, I even remember doing like we did a huge family church history tour right before I left, or pretty close to before I left, and did it in a big van and everything. And so a lot of this sort of stuff building up and being like, I saw this is where the first vision happened. And so I was just, getting into that exciting kind of missionary mentality. And I was genuinely excited. And one of the things that's hard when you start expressing any kind of doubt or having any kind of struggle, it's, well, did you want to come? And it's like, yeah, I did. I'm not lying about that, it comes time to go. And I remember getting dropped off the MTC, and some of the stuff's probably not super significant, but the day that I get dropped off, and at the time, you're in this big sort of kind of hall and there's people speaking, and it was probably the mission president. I think it might've been Worthland's brother or something. Yeah. Is that right?
Or son.
Yeah. And that they would kind of you would go one way and then your parents would go the other way. And I want to say it was one of the only times I remember my dad getting a little teary eyed. He's very sort of stoic. I'm kind of the same way. So I get it. But, I think he was really proud, and I was really proud of myself for doing this. And I enjoyed the MTC, and I'm noticing that that's not normal. A lot of people they hated that part, and then as soon as they left, things got better. Mine was exactly the opposite. And it wasn't a language speaking mission. So it was only, I think, 3 weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks. So I was not in there a long time. It does feel like you're in there for longer. And it's you almost forget oh yeah, I'm in Provo. There's people outside of this place that aren't here to serve missions. It's that insular, Mm-hmm. And I think that I had a combined district. So there were more of us that were going to different places in the States, and I got along with my companion. I got along really well with a lot of the people in the district. I was always a little bit weary of, and I had grown up watching I was a little bit late to it, but Seinfeld and SNL and all this stuff. And I'm thinking I'm going to kind of need some humor, when I'm here, because that's just how it is. And I sometimes pushing it to a line and seeing how people react. I mean, okay, too far, I'm going to back that up. And I knew MTC, let's see where it is. It's kind of a fun little social experiment. What can I kind of poke fun in and what can I not? But it was great. I made friends there who also had amazing senses of humor, and was a really good experience in the MTC. And as soon as we left, so we fly out to Boston, we go into Logan Airport, and I remember sitting next to this Catholic guy who was just super chatty, and he was like, "Oh, well, I wish you boys the best." And, and I was like, what an amazing plane ride, descending into Boston. This Catholic guy. He's just like quintessential Bostonian who is like wishing us luck and this is a good omen. And, I get out of the plane and just, started kind of instantly feeling like kind of darker. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't this overwhelming thing, but it's like, okay, everyone says that it's kind of hard. You got familiar with the MTC. You had to say bye to a lot of the people that went different places. But this is why I'm here and everything. And again, I don't know how it's done really anymore, but you go into a room, there's all the missionaries and you're getting to know everybody. They have snacks and everything. And then you're assigned to your trainer. And then we head out. So my first area was Pittsfield, which is, I think, almost the furthest west that you can get in the state. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll make it to Boston eventually. Whatever, that's fine, And you almost feel guilty about, like, I want to be on Cambridge, like, holding up a Book of Mormon, like preaching to atheists, right? Like, that's the fun stuff.
Harvard Square.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, really? Like, I'm in the pits, like, the joke writes itself. Well, okay, it's fine. But you feel kind of guilty, like, you're here for this, and so you sort of push that away, and it wasn't a huge problem. But and my trainer was just quintessential gung-ho, like, I hesitate to even use this example, but like, think of like Book of Mormon musical, like that kind of missionary.
Elder Price.
Yeah, just, like, just amazing guy. Like, let's train you. Do you need anything? Like, super helpful.
Earnest.
Yeah.
That earnestness.
Yep. And he was really excited about helping me out and training me. And so before we went out, and this sticks out to me still very vividly, I am in, it was like a little kitchen area, and we were assigned our companions, and we're kind of just saying bye to each other. And there was a sister missionary who I was really good friends with in the MTC. And kind of weirdly enough, there was one moment where her companion left. And so my companion and I were assigned to her as like these chaperones. And we're like, oh, this is kind of unique. And like, yeah, it's just for like a couple days, but just like walk her home. It was weird. It was also like we were dating this sister missionary. We would joke about it, right? In fact, one time we were in one of those big group meetings and she was in between us. And they were like, elders, like, that's inappropriate, And we're like, she's our companion, right? They thought we were just messing around with them. So they like call us out and chew us out. And she's like, no, like, they're being serious. Like, they're kind of my temporary companions right now until I get a new one that comes in. And so, yeah, we would like drop her off and just sort of make reverse polygamy jokes and all that stuff. But, so we became really close, right? As much as you can in the MTC. So we're in this little reception area and kind of saying, hey, how are you feeling? Right. And is everything okay? And she's like, I'm a little nervous. I'm like, okay, good. Me too. And we're being very honest with each other. And, I said, well, like, good luck. We'll see each other at the next, district meeting, whatever they're called, and we high five each other. Right. And which we did at the MTC. And she walks away, and then I kind of feel this, right? And I'm like, I look, and there's an elder, and then there's another elder over here. And I see this thing that's like, what does AP mean, right? Oh, they're the assistant to the president, right? And in kind of a low voice, one of them says, elder, we just wanted to let you know that high-fiving a sister missionary is, and there was this term that was pervasive in the MTC culture and around that time, which was called quiet dignities. You guys ever heard of this term? I can't seem to find anybody, but people use it all the time.
We believe you.
Yeah, I'm like looking around, like, anybody.
What is it?
Called quiet dignity.
Quiet.
It was this like slogan, and keep in mind, this was 2002. This was pretty close. The bar was raised. Remember when Ballard did that in like maybe late 90s or something? And then Ballard came to the MTC with his wife, and they did this huge role play thing where they had two elders, and they were talking about how they're basically getting rid of the discussions, and it's going to be this free form, kind of open dialogue, and everyone was super excited. So they were kind of modeling it. So that was sort of some of the, I don't know, like cultural milieu that I was coming into the mission with.
Is that Preach My Gospel introduction?
I think it was before that even.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were like, we get to see this like in the MTC, like these major changes. And of course, like you go out and then the senior missionaries are like, well, you know, your grandfather didn't you got to memorize it. And we're like, nah, like Ballard said we didn't. Right. So there's like an immediate kind of fun, like a little bit of jealousy, I think, from the older missionaries. So anyway, this term was just like pervasive. I remember hearing this. And they just kind of chastised me. Like, you know, it's undignified to high five like anyone, let alone like a sister missionary. And just the way of like the sort of smarmy, like arm around the shoulder and like super passive aggressive, like, okay, kind of thing. Like that, they didn't say that, but, and then they leave. Right. And
is that a South Park reference you just made?
You know, I've only seen one episode.
Okay,
guess which one
not.
it is?
Maybe not. Mr. Hanky?
Nope.
Oh.
The Mormonism. The Mormonism.
Oh, the Mormons.
It's the only one I've
All
ever
about
seen.
The Mormons.
Yeah,
All
I
about
was
the-
Team Simpsons, like all the way.
Okay.
Yeah. Plus we didn't have cable, so
All right.
yeah. So yeah, they chastised me, and it didn't take long to like reflect on this, kind of looking back, but something just kind of broke in my brain, and it was I don't even want to use the shelf cracking, because that's not really what it was. It had nothing to do with any LDS truth claims. It was just, you can't be here. You are not cut out for this. And all of this was like unconscious. I wasn't even thinking about it like this, but it did start. I think it was a catalyst for just constantly being in my own head and finding confirming reasons why you're not a good enough Mormon to be doing this because you high-fived a sister, right? It's just stuff like that. And of course it's ridiculous. And I think you kind of blow it off, but things just escalate, you know, mission culture. It gets insane, you know, I don't like this word. I don't think it's productive when it's being used in conjunction with the church. I get it. But like, it was like, whoa, this is culty. Like what? Like I high-fived a sister missionary. We were like close friends. Like I felt like I made out with her, and that's like, maybe that warrants the amount of chastisement. Anyway, it was just nuts. And I just remember thinking like, okay, it's one thing, it's not a big deal, but it was symbolic, I guess is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Of if that is a problem, I don't think I can be me. Right? Okay, it's time to not be me. It's time to put that aside. That's what a mission is about. And it just started this short journey of how do I find my real self, which is don't make jokes about anything, like everything's serious. And so it was really hard kind of moving forward. So that was, I think, the first major kind of crack of mental health issues on the mission. And because I had never experienced depression, anxiety, as far as I know, I had nothing like that. When I went to Snow, and true, I had family there, extended family. I don't think I was ever homesick at all. I loved it. And so I wasn't worried about that. And so I didn't understand it. I was just thinking, what is this? Okay, well, it's opposition. Everybody told you that Satan's going to try to get in your head. And so don't make a big deal of this. And so it just sort of started this like vigilance of, looking for things that confirm that I was not the right kind of person to be there. I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but does that make sense?
Yeah.
Margi's vibing. She's not.
I just feel so much for you because of how isolating it would feel, and how what I'm hearing is just sort of those controls being amped up to a level, and really, I mean, having this sense of self emerge where on some level you're feeling, I can't be me. I have this sense that I will self-betray. I will betray myself it's really, really powerful. And also to be alone, like you're without your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to borrow on a military analogy, just like boot camp wants to break you down and build you back up, high demand religions want to break your identity down and have you adopt the theological or spiritual or cultural mindset of the high demand religion. So it was a spiritual or theological or cultural boot camp for you, where they're basically saying, are you going to be you, or are you going to be who we want you to be?
Yeah. And
maybe
there were a few moments like that in the MTC. I actually skipped over one that I just remembered now. They would film you and you would teach fake investigators. Do they still do this?
I remember that when I was there, but
yeah. And they would bring you out and kind of like give you notes, like stage notes on, well, you should have maybe do this. And like, the whole thing was like, you need to be more emotional. Like, that's really what it was. It was hard for me because it was like, if I'm not really going to feel it, this is fake. They're not really looking into the church. Like, why am I being, I got kind of defensive, and like, well, it's not real. So like, why am I getting, marked down? I'm getting like a D- on this thing because they didn't actually grade it, but because I didn't cry. I got it. I can't manufacture that, I guess. So there were little things like that. I'm like, whatever, I can get past that. And so it started earlier, but it's just weird that I didn't feel like the militarization thing didn't happen in the MTC. It happened when I left, when those restrictions are often taken off, right? For a lot of people that get out to the field. So yeah, there are little things that kind of added up, and you just start kind of like compartmentalizing, like, well, this is how it's supposed to be. You gotta do this and this. And if that means losing yourself and, this is good. This is good for you. This is like why you're out here. Right. So that was kind of my initial experience. And I wasn't out, this was maybe 2-3 weeks in, and it just got worse. And it's hard to explain it now because I haven't really had it happen since then. The anxiety and depression, and I didn't actually talk to somebody until maybe 4 or 5 weeks in. I actually had to leave the state to go to New Hampshire to see a LDS services counselor. And, so there were a lot of things that got me there, but just the feelings got worse. I'm like, why isn't this working? Like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I'm like checking off the formulas. I'm like, I haven't done this. I didn't do this. And you start like combing over the last year of your life. Like, did I lie on accident to my bishop? Like, was there a billboard I saw that had like a shoulder on it? And I'm like, was that it? No, and like you start becoming obsessive about, well, okay, I missed something because the formula is not working. Right. And, so yeah, I felt bad for my companion. So I just started developing depression and anxiety. And I didn't know what to do. And it got to the point where I'd like lock myself in the bathroom, and I would call, like one time I called a friend who I don't wonder if he remembers this, but it was a friend who I had at Snow. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just need to talk to somebody, and I felt like I got to be quick as my companion, and he probably would have been like, he wasn't some taskmaster, but I would call people, and I was like, should I call my parents? Like, no, that's going to be you have to tell them everything's okay. And I tried that for a few weeks, and we're visiting members, and I'm trying to put on like hey, everything's cool. And we're trying to teach people. And part of it too was it was getting to be winter in Boston, and it was dreary, and it was freezing, and it was snowy. And we were in a very, working class, like poor area, which made me feel guilty because I'm like, am I being classist? Is that why I'm feeling bad right now? And I just can't identify what it is because I've never experienced any of this before. Right. And so how do I identify what the problem is? And I remember getting to the point where I get so numb where I'm getting blessings, and I'm like, I already know what they're going to say. I've heard it before. And they're going to say, well, read the scripture. I'm like, oh, is it this one? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, sorry. I'm like, I can predict what you're going to tell me, right? I have that marked. Like, give me something new because none of this is working. And, I finally got the mission president involved. And I mean, he tried so hard to make it work. He moved me with another elder who was, he had maybe 2 weeks left of his mission. And he says, don't let the president know, but like, if you want to go see the Star Wars movie, like if you want to go do anything, I don't care. Whatever you think will help you. I'm done. I don't really care what we do. If you want to sleep in, and he was trying to help me in that way. And I was just like, no, like that's not like the right move. So, we got to keep doing it. And like, but I appreciate that you're trying to not put pressure on me. And, at one point I went out and I stayed the night at the president's home. And I remember he's like, I want you to go up in this room and just pray. Right. And it wasn't like pray to figure out what to do. It's like pray and then stay. Right. And so I'm up there for hours, and he's letting me, like, he'd come up with the phone and be like, this person from your young men's is on the phone. Do you want to talk to this person? And so I'd be like, oh, and I would get these like joyful feelings like, oh, I don't know if I should use names or not here, but it was
Brother Jones.
It was a young men's leader who I loved, and I still love this guy, and he would just make me feel a little bit better in the moment, and to this day, I don't know like how curated these calls were. And my dad, I mean, I still have these letters from my dad, just like pouring his heart out, being very vulnerable, I think, for him, and saying like, I will like fly out and I will live with you for a week, like whatever we need to do. And, he, of course he didn't know that like, this is making it so much worse, right? The ward's fasting for him. Like, why would you tell me that? Like now
your home ward was told that you're struggling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm like, well, and it's not just that, like, oh, cool, now they know, but now I got to stay out for another 2 months because prayers don't work for 1,000, like 200 people, right? So it's more pressure. And I get that like no one had those intentions, but none of this was really making it better. And finally, my stake president is on the phone. And so this like day-long sort of thing where I'm praying on and off and he's bringing me the phone and everything. And he says, look, I think my son had what you're experiencing when he came home from his mission. And I think my daughter had this when she got married. So, and he's like, and I don't think the president would want me telling you this if he knew this, but if it's like what I think it might be, like you need to get out of there. Like you might need to come home. And it was the first time anybody had even suggested that.
Who's this again?
It was my stake president back home.
Okay.
And, he's like, I don't want to tell you what to do, but like, you need to know that this is an option and it's okay. And it was like, finally someone's like allowing me to like even consider this. Right.
Did you happen to see that clip I shared a month or two ago where Elder Holland basically says, don't leave, don't you dare leave. Yeah. That he doesn't know a more pitiable group on earth than Mormon missionaries that return home early. He says you're going to ruin your life. Like, I'm guessing that was the culture you were facing early, but that can have disastrous consequences on the mental health of missionaries.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's a lot better. And I had not heard that until it was shared. Right. But this is exactly how it was. And people are telling you this, and people kind of play good cop, bad cop. Like, we'll think of these blessings and you're blessing your family and all this, but then it's like, well, what are the implications of that if I don't though? And then people would go bad cop. And I thought about bringing it. I couldn't find it, but I got a letter at one point when it was getting really close to like, I want to leave, please let me leave. And, it was an area authority and it was like 5 pages of guilt, gloom, doom. It was like, when you have like, you're not going to meet the people you're supposed to, when you meet, your wife, which like maybe you like altered the course of that now. And, like, what are you going to tell, I'm like paraphrasing, but it was like, what are you going to tell your 19-year-old son when it comes time for him to go? Right. And I'm not in a mental state where I'm like, whatever, you're like, yeah, all this is true. This guy has like priesthood authority over me. The mission president has priesthood authority over me, more so than the stake president. So he's like a consultant, but like, I got to go with with the mission president, right? Cause you're trying to like follow the authority. And it was just horrible. I've never, ever even experienced to the level I have now in terms of mental health, that feeling. And I start writing in my journal. Like, I can't get this out anywhere, but like, I feel like I'm in a cage. And, you know, I remember at one point I called the mission president and I was like, I'm not like asking, I'm not like having a conversation with you. I'm just informing you if I can't get on a plane, like I'm using the rest of my money on my little card, which is like $100, and I'm getting on a bus. Like I'm leaving. I'm just telling you that this is what's going to happen, you know? And he's like, okay, well, let's try this. And I'm like, I'm sick of trying all these things. And I'm skipping over quite a bit of things that they had tried to do with talking to the counselor, which was just like, have you tried praying? Have you tried? I'm like, okay, I knew like 5 minutes in, like, this is not going to help in any way. So, and I just like, you lose trust. I don't trust this person because it's like, it's to the point, like almost a caricature where they say the thing and I leave and I turn back and I see like the mission president giving like him a bag of money and he's like, oh shoot, and like runs off. Right. It's like, oh, okay. Of course you're going to say that. So it was hard, you know, I didn't want to disappoint the ward and my parents, and I'm like ruining the experience of my companions, and it just like folds in and everything becomes your fault. And you start believing everyone that says, and this is what was the hardest, I think was, again, this formula is not working. I can't find the thing I did where God's mad at me and he's making me feel like this. Right. And so once you kind of check off all these things, you know, the blessings and the scriptures and all of this, and you've tried teaching people about this thing and all that, then people can kind of get nasty and they'll say, what did you do before you came out? And I'm like, nothing. Like, I'm not lying about that. I wanted to be here. And the worst part is that you start believing it because there's no other way out, right? And there's no explanation because it's true. These things don't just happen. You know, it's like reverse prosperity gospel. So it's something that I'm doing. And then things got really, really bad. So, the day that I decided like I'm leaving and I'm like just telling people I'm leaving. So is it okay if I read?
Please.
Just a part of my mission journal. To this day, I'm still really bad at journaling because it's always so negative. And it's always the bad things. And I'm like, I don't want my kids to think my life was horrible. So, and I think no one's ever heard this except me. I don't think my wife's even seen this because it's embarrassing. It's a horrible part of my life I don't like talking about. So it's like a page and a half. But this was like the best way to describe my mindset at the time. It's also really angsty, embarrassing. So I will acknowledge that as I read this. But this was to me. I thought no one's going to read this. This is a letter to me to try to like fix myself and to get myself like out of this funk. But it was mostly just accepting and being resigned to the fact that like you failed. Okay. So here's part of this. It says, the past week and a half have been the most difficult days of my life. I've never felt this bad. A sick feeling enters me whenever I think about staying here. Sorry, my writing and the lighting is kind of rough. So like, I have never been so selfish, and I know that I am only thinking of myself. I am trying, but things keep getting worse. There are so many wonderful people that are trying to help me, but this is my decision, and I feel I need to escape. I feel so trapped. The more I think about home, the more I freak out and want to run away. The only feelings of peace and comfort come when I think about returning home. I know I will be sad when I return, but I will have family and friends. Here I am alone. I've heard from so many people that I am not alone, but that's how I feel. I am not fit to do this important work. The bar has been raised, and I cannot clear it. The Lord does not need spiritual weaklings. Elder Ballard said it during conference. I am wasting the Lord's time. I am a stumbling block to this great work. The work is great. I am not. I cannot bear to think of 2 years of this. The Lord needs strong missionaries. Since I've been here, I have lost my personality. I feel like I had like a personality lobotomy. I was like, nothing's even funny. It started to terrify me. I'm like, is it like I lost my taste forever? I'm never going to get this back. So I thought, well, I may as well leave because I've lost my entire personality. Little editorial here as I read. I've talked to my companion. He's a great missionary, and my stubborn mind is so set that I will not listen. It will be hard to explain to everyone at home why I couldn't do it. If I knew this would happen, I would have never left home. My parents will be disappointed. There is no excuse for what I'm doing. I'm selfish, but don't know what that says. Let me keep going. I'm selfish. It just keeps repeating that. My life will probably be all messed up. I know the church is true, but I can't do this. I feel bad when I pray now. If I love the Lord, why can't I serve a mission? I don't know. I am failing the Lord. He knows what I'm feeling. He felt it too. I only hope he will have mercy on me. I'm still a good person. I'm just not ready and willing to sacrifice so much and not be happy doing it. Again, the only comfort I feel comes from thinking that I can be home in a few days. I can't believe this is happening to me. Life's ironic sometimes. Nevertheless, it is my choice. Nobody's forcing this upon me. It just kind of keeps going, like I'm failing over and over again. I'm a terrible example and I don't deserve anything. Please try to understand where I'm coming from. My desire, my spark, my love for the people is missing. My thoughts are focused on myself. Forgive me. I don't even know who I'm talking to. Like, is it me? Is it God? You know, is this Nephi right here? Nephi's Psalm. I am nothing.
Oh, wretched man.
Yeah, look, it's like, I am nothing and I ask for forgiveness. I just want the sick, uneasy feeling to depart. The Spirit is not here. Anyway, it just kind of keeps going like this. I'm sorry. I have failed my God sincerely. Surely he will fail me. I'm probably worse off than the very people that we are trying to share the gospel with. And then, so that was, this is November 23rd, 2022. So almost 20 years ago. And,
2002.
Oh, what did I say? Yeah. 2002.
Okay.
Yeah. And, that was, I guess, the day I'm like, I'm out. I mean, I have to accept that I'm leaving. So little bit into my mindset at the time. And I didn't plan on getting emotional, and I'm not, because it's been so long that I'm so far removed from it, but it created a lot of damage that we can kind of get into a little bit more. So I end up leaving. I fly home, and the only thing I wanted to say too, before we switch back over to Mitch, when the mission president drove me to the airport and I get out of his car, and I say this with empathy for him because he was trying to do everything he possibly could, good cop, bad cop, to like keep me out. So I understand where he's coming from. But the last thing he said to me was, "Oh, just so you know, if an elder leaves early, the church won't pay for the plane ticket. Your parents do, but I think you need to do this." And that was it. That was the last thing he ever said to me. So I even was hesitant. Should I even share that? But so that was the thing echoing in my mind as I like dramatically, walked into the airport with my stuff and just thinking like, and I want to be clear, like I don't think I had any like suicide ideation or anything like that. The closest it got, and this is in my journal at points, was like praying that, honestly, like this was logical to me, praying that if I can get like clipped by a car or like give me like half cancer, right? Or something, so I can like go home, but then get better because I don't want to die, but like I can't be here. And mental health stuff, even at the time, you're just making crap up. You had sex with your girlfriend and this is a stupid excuse people will tell you this, right? To just go home. So you need something physical that'll get you out of here, right? And then, get on the plane, fly home. I think I've ruined my entire life. And when I landed, my parents were there, and they become a lot more understanding of what was going on. They just didn't understand what it was. I didn't have any experience with this. I remember going into the bathroom first, just like trying to like gain any sense of composure and just losing it. Like, how am I going to face my parents? So that was really, really hard. And fortunately they responded just in a way that was extremely soothing. I don't know, like if my stake president had to like smack my dad around a bit, it'd be like, hey, like the stuff you're doing is like not helping him at all. So the total experience was maybe like mid-October to end of November. I mean, it wasn't a long experience.
So you were in the field how long?
Maybe 8 weeks. I mean, it really was not a long time. Yeah. But it's funny how it's like proportionately 10 years, So, and one of the reasons too, that I think I'm probably not getting like hyper emotional as I read this, the guilt that I had lasted up until fairly recently. And then it like reversed. I'll explain that later, but yeah. So, all right, sorry, I've taken up too much time on that.
No,
so
and I'll just, there's so much there. Thank you for being vulnerable. I'm guessing Margi's got something she wants to say, but I'll just say, that's what happens when you stuff down who you are. It creates mental illness, depression, and anxiety. It's unhealthy. But I'm also going to say it's a really terrible conflict of interest for the mission to control who your therapist is, because the mission's only going to choose a therapist that's going to be, well, too often a mission president's going to choose a therapist that's going to want to nudge you and push you to stay in your mission. And that's a conflict of interest, and it's unethical. It's often unethical. Now, I'm sure there's some missionary therapists out there that say, hey, you'll be fine either way. Do what's best for you. Do what's healthiest for you. But I think there's a conflict of interest there. A couple other things I'll just say is this experience you share is, I mean, just today we're releasing an episode on Mormon Stories about a gay Mormon kid who goes on a mission, and he ends up wanting to die on his mission because he's got homophobic companions and he wants to jump off a bridge. You know what I mean? Like suicidality on a mission is real. You had partial suicidality, but that's a real thing. I just wanted to say that. And I also wanted to say that there's this massive problem in 2022 with missionaries experiencing anxiety and depression. I would say the stats are as large as over half of current Mormon missionaries serving are either have or are experiencing some sort of anxiety and depression. And the stats of early return missionaries now in 2022 is something as high as a third of all missionaries called on missions, Mormon missionaries called on missions, end up coming home early at some point on their missions. So mental health, pressure, depression, anxiety, suicidality, and I have missionaries reaching out to me weekly. I have actively serving Mormon missionaries saying, hey, John, I'm on a mission. I don't believe anymore. My parents forced me to go. Happened twice this week. And they're like, what do I do? If I tell my parents, they'll be super disappointed. But if I stay, I may not be okay. And I don't know what to tell these kids. I don't want to be the bad Mormon Voldemort saying, leave your mission. You know, I don't know what these kids are going to face when they get home. So like, I just wish the church would just take the foot off the pedal for all the pressure, all the guilt. I think they're trying to sometimes, but I just think it's still there in many, many instances. And
it's probably better. I mean, they at least have some articles you'll see in the Ensign. I remember even like 2010, I'm like, hey, Liz, look, like my wife, like there's a thing about missions and depression.
Yeah.
And it was like, cool. There's something now. And
I remember when my mission, there was a month on my mission where one elder was sent home for having sex on the bathroom floor with the bishop's wife or the branch president's wife. And then another missionary was sent home for molesting a kid while dressing him for their baptism. And the mission president pulls out this quote from like, I don't know, Joseph Fielding Smith or Joseph F. Smith that literally says, I would rather return home in a pine box than without honor from my mission.
Yeah, I don't think I had heard that at the time, but you know, the sort of famous Hinckley story, right? Where he's like under a tree and he's reading a letter. He's like, oh, this is hard. And then it's like, what is it? It's like, go to work. And I mean, it's basically the idea of you're got to quit thinking about yourself, right? And that was super common at the time where everybody knew that talk and everybody had read that, and you pull that out and that's how you get over it. And so like, I see value in that. I do, right? Like self-service is great, but you know, there's a line, and I just didn't know that it was being crossed for me because I never experienced it. And then you get back and like, you know, it was like, oh, well, in the culture, at least in my area, like everyone stays. There's like, you know, the one weird kid that comes home and everyone has rumors as to why. And then
he had sex or looked at porn or you know,
And I was like, well, that's me now. So like, what do I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a fun thing to come back to.
And that you'll never marry because a faithful woman won't want you if you return home early from your mission. Like there's just so many awful things that we need to change that culture because it has terrible, terrible effects. Margie, were you going to add anything?
I don't think so. Just thanks so much for sharing that. I feel so deeply it's clear in what you shared from your journal, that excerpt, just the cost of what happens. And I think this is, in your case, it's the mission. For other people, they get married young.
Yeah.
And for other people, they're mothers of, many children or mothers at all, or right. So for whatever reason, when you're living the formula and you're doing your best to kind of show up in good faith and do the right thing, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you're not having the experience you expected, that what you're told and what you experience is this sense of it's you. It's your fault. And then all this aggressive energy towards you, and what this means about your innate worthiness, what you're capable of, what you're doing wrong, and that stuff, I feel like even after you leave the church and you can change your beliefs and you can rebuild, that is sticky stuff. It tends to stay. And I see it a lot in coaching, is this relentless self-aggressiveness, that's what makes me good. That's what I need to be a good person, and that is just tragic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if the only solution is go harder, right? And that's kind of, and I'll kick it over to Mitch, but like, that's kind of the last thing I'll say is, as far as how did this impact my, belief in Mormonism's truth claims? No, not at all. It was, they're right. These leaders are right. I've kind of ruined everything, so let's rebuild. And that's kind of where I was. So this had really almost no impact on that, at least explicitly and consciously, other than maybe a little bit of nuance for, these leaders mean well with some things, and this was maybe a few months later with a little bit of distance. They mean well, but they still are leaders with, authority and from God. And so it's okay. It's okay to, find a line with authorities who might not be completely 100% right because they don't know your full situation. And that was about as far as it went for me at the time.
So what I'm hearing you say in that is just kind of, you swallowed it. Right? And you were kind of like, what they're saying about me must be true.
And how much of a walk of shame? It sounds like your stake president helped your parents treat you okay.
Yeah, my parents were awesome.
Were there negative social repercussions for you coming home early?
So I didn't want to be home at all. I just needed to leave where I was. And I thought that'll fix it, I guess. And so when I went home, I was there for the rest of, probably December. So just in time for Christmas, and which is exactly what my parents wanted. That was the best present they could receive, right? Just kidding.
Was that you leave as soon as possible?
No. The other thing too is like,
you're saying
me coming home early.
That
it was kind of a dark
sad
joke,
for them,
probably.
Oh.
But they were really good about it, and like my dad, he set me up with an actual trained psychologist who had a degree, who he thought could help. And I think he even came with me once. I don't know if he was in the room at the time, and then my ward was actually really cool. I remember my bishop at the time came over and just said, is there anything that we can do? He just acknowledged we understand how it's awkward, right? And I think it's more in your head than people in the ward. I think people are just happy to see that you're okay. And I always remember this, and I love that this really touched me. He's like, I can go through and I can point at every single family in this ward and just dump all the crap they're dealing with, and no one knows. Okay. So just trying to make me feel like you're not alone in any of this, so I came home to, I think, a really friendly environment. But I immediately decided I got to go back to Snow College. I need to get busy. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to school. And that was, and I won't get into it, but that's where I regained my sense of humor. And it was really dark because you'd see people and they'd be like, hey, you're not supposed to be here, right? And so I would lean into it and have fun with it. That was my way of coping. So I would say it wasn't horrible when I came back to Snow College. It was more awkward. And in my experience, individual people are usually empathetic and understanding, and they're willing to hear you out. But you get 2 or 3 and the story changes. So that was kind of my experience with that coming back.
Sounds like you kind of came back to yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was, I remember like trying, like, is this thing funny? Like, because I feel like I lost my sense of humor. And I know that's, I want to like limit my entire identity to like things that I think are funny, but it was significant and it was symbolic as, oh, maybe I can be, but it also there was dissonance there because I'm like, my leaders are right. I screwed everything up and I'm going to destroy my life. And maybe I can like be a ministering angel with the other terrible people in the celestial kingdom at the bottom level if I can make it there to that point. But that kind of conflicted with, but why do I feel better? Like this doesn't make any sense. I feel happy again. And it things bounced back. And I thought, I kind of thought I was going to have to deal with this. And in fact, the psychologist, after a few times, I'm like, I think I'm good. I don't think I need medication even. I was a little prideful with that. I'm like, I'm going to try to not do that. So it just seemed like getting back, and I took 18 credits. My advisor was like, I wouldn't do this. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I was busy. I had an amazing social life and it was really good. And so I thought why am I feeling better? So there was definitely a conflict that I had not quite worked through.
Here's a hard question.
Yeah.
You ready? Did you hide from the girls that you returned early from your mission?
No
judgment. No judgment.
That's a great question, actually. You know what? I think most of them had graduated and had moved out. So it was like a new crop in. I don't know. I don't remember that. Probably yes, I guess, right? I don't know. Huh.
But I love that you brought up the point of him kind of saving himself or coming back to himself, because I do think it's one thing to do that in those younger years, as you're adulting, just like newly out in the world in this experience of Boston, this controlled experiment. It's another thing to have this experience that's so conflicting with everything you've learned it should feel like or be, and then be told like what it means about your life, that you're going to be destroyed, that everything you dream about it and everyone else is going to have it, that all they have to do is finish their mission and they'll meet who they should meet and or whatever. And basically your life is, going to be such a disappointment and miserable. And you're like, I still need to. I mean, that's powerful to me. Yeah. That is really powerful.
I guess I thought it was fleeting, right? Like I am eternally kind of hosed unless I go back out or figure something out. Maybe I'll go out as an older person with my spouse. Then I'll like do it, right? And so, I'll get into this more later in the college years, but the overcompensation like kicked in big time. And you start seeing, it's just like this sense of unfairness. I'm like, well, like this guy, he's like doing shots. He went on a 2-year mission. And he seems fine. Like he gets a pass. He's like marriage material. But then I come home early for legitimate reasons. I think, the church told me that they were legitimate. Like 2 weeks after I got home, I get a call. I'm living with my grandfather who lives close to campus. And they're like, this is so-and-so from like, what is this? And like, we wanted to let you know that you have an honorable release, And if I'll be honest, my first instinct was like, why do I care? I was kind of upset about that. I'm like, what is this, the military? Like I volunteered, I'm paying. I mean, not out of my own money, but like my family. Like, and I need like, praise from Caesar, like it just kind of bothered me. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't even think about that, but it's weird to know that you had to consider that my mental health issues may have warranted a court-martial or whatever the Mormon equivalent of that is on a mission. So yeah, you just start seeing this social like mission inequality. Like, what do I got to do to get to the point where I'm as good as the person that went 2 years, you know? And I did a lot of stuff, so I'll get there. But yeah, sorry, I'm taking way too much time. But the mission thing is like a big part of my story. So yeah. One more story I'd like to tell is just how that reflects how lonely I think this was. And this might have been just my experience at the time, but this was something that you just didn't talk about. No one talked about this, especially if it was for non-health, like physically, health-related reasons. So it was super lonely. And I ended up getting a call from an acquaintance that I had who was living up in Salt Lake. And we had met a few times through mutual friends. And I said, oh, hey, Drew, what's going on? And he's like, he was a little bit hesitant. He says, I heard that you came home from remission early. Like, did that happen? I was like, yeah, it's pretty recent. And he says, yeah, I had heard about that, and I got your number from so-and-so, and that happened to me, and I have not been able to talk about it since I came home, 6 months ago or whatever. It had been a lot longer than I had been home. And I just need someone to talk to. And I was like, the fact that we didn't really know each other, I think really highlights that he had no one to talk to. He says, I can't even talk to my parents about this. And again, maybe we were like isolated where other people did not experience that. And so we talked for like 3 hours about, just, was it like this? Yeah, like exactly like that. And it was just this understanding of like things that we couldn't articulate on our own, and not talking about it. You're not reflecting on it. You kind of want to move past it, but it was so, cathartic and valuable to sort of build this relationship over this phone conversation. And
so he returned home early too.
Yeah. And it must have been like a few weeks later. I don't know exactly the timeline, but I literally in a newspaper see that he was killed in a car crash. And I just get these chills. And I remember, thinking at one point, I'm glad he got that out, that we were able to have that conversation, because he was just keeping it in and he couldn't talk to friends about it. It was just this shameful thing. And I think that kind of maybe planted a seed, maybe this is something that should be open more, So I kind of had forgotten about that till right now. But it just showed how isolated people can be with this. And I hope it's better now. I hope it's not as taboo to talk about this. So
one of the things I've noticed, like with the baseball baptisms, soccer baptisms kind of thing, the church will have a real problem culturally on missions. And then they'll, like wasps or weeds, they'll try and beat it back a little bit when it gets negative public exposure. Mm-hmm. But then it like weeds or wasps, they come back. And it's just, unless you make really systemic changes at the core, it's just going to be temporary, these attempts at changing things. But there's so like this Holland video that I shared a few weeks back, where Holland says horrible things about missionaries who return early. That was like a audio tape or a videotape recording that wasn't shared officially by top church leaders. It's like what mission presidents or missionaries or bishops or whoever kept in their drawers or filing cabinets and brought out whenever a missionary was thinking about leaving home early. So there's this cultural layer, just like, like when Spencer W. Kimball declared oral sex to be sinful. You can make declarations that try and make changes and change the culture, but you've got decades, if not centuries, of conditioning that persists.
That's right.
I think that's why this is so hard. Mm-hmm. That's why superficial cosmetic changes are really just temporary.
Yeah, I don't think that there was even any data at the time. Like, no one knew. Like, does this happen to anybody else? You just feel like, I guess you're in the vast minority. Most stay, or it's health reasons or something. So you feel super alone. And there was a colleague I had at UVU at one point who was actually researching this in maybe 2015, 2016.
I remember that.
Chris Doty. awesome stuff. She did some presentations on this, but she was actually examining this, doing qualitative research on what's your experience coming home. So I know that there's more now, and I think she might have been invited even to present to church headquarters, like, what are you getting? And I think the church genuinely seemed interested, like, we can use this to help. So I hope that they have.
Yeah. And I'll just give, for those who care more about this issue, I did a whole series on Mormon Stories about early mission return, where I think I interviewed 6 missionaries that returned home early for various reasons. So we'll include that in the show notes. All right. Well, Mitch, you've been really patient.
Yeah.
You went to Ukraine.
Yeah. So
I used to say the Ukraine, and then I learned that you shouldn't say that because I have a Mormon Stories episode with the Ukrainian.
Oh, cool.
But Ukraine is in the news. Even today, Ukraine is in the news.
That's right. Yep. Unfortunately.
Sadly.
Yeah. So I got my call to serve in the Kiev mission. Prepared, tried to learn a little bit of language, learn about the culture. Had talked to some missionaries who had previously gone there and got really excited about going to a foreign mission, learning a language. Am I good? Okay. I went to the MTC a couple days after then President Thomas S. Monson, who was the prophet at the time, gave an announcement about the age change. So kind of like it would have been 2012. In October, and that's when I went into the MTC. And my MTC stay was for 3 months, so 12 weeks. And I remember at the MTC, had a great district, a lot of people, I meshed well with. I felt like, we were friends and things like that. But I remember feeling a lot of guilt in the MTC. Every week, they would have on Sundays and on Tuesdays, if I remembering correctly, they would have big devotionals where all the missionaries would come. This was at the Provo MTC, come into the big, gym, and they'd bring in different speakers. And it was kind of a joke in our district, but the first or the second speaker we listened to kind of listed off all these like kind of morbid scenarios, maybe not morbid, but sad things. And he was like, stand up if your girlfriend's broken up with you since you've been here. Stand up if you're homesick. Stand up if you feel depressed. Things like that. And that was kind of like a rolling joke in our district. It was like, stand up if you're depressed. Stand up if blah blah blah. But it did kind of describe, I don't know, kind of how I felt in the MTC. There was a lot of guilt tripping done as like, have you confessed everything? And I remember just feeling a lot of guilt for undisclosed, just things that normal people growing up would do, messing around with a girlfriend and masturbation, things like that, and just feeling like so terrible and wanting to, not feel that way. And I remember reaching out to, I don't remember exactly how the priesthood structure was in the MTC, but whoever the leader was, and just chatting about that with him and like thinking, oh no, am I going to go home for masturbating, things like that, undisclosed before my mission. And they were like, oh, it's okay. Thanks for telling us. Great. Let's, you're fine. And so that was kind of a theme in the MTC, was just feeling a lot of guilt, not feeling good enough. It was fun to learn Ukrainian, learning about the culture. One of our MTC teachers was a Ukrainian and one was an American who had served in Ukraine. So a lot of good experiences, a lot of guilt as well. I enjoyed, aspects of the MTC. I do remember for Thanksgiving, they let us watch 17 Miracles, and I was getting an ingrown toenail at the time, and so I had an appointment to go get an ingrown toenail surgery. And after watching 17 Miracles, I remember going back to the MTC dorm and getting down on my knees and saying like, I just watched this movie. I believe in miracles. I'm really scared of needles and surgery. Like, please make this go away in the morning so I don't have to get this surgery. And I ended up going and having to get the surgery in the morning, and the other side of my nail grew in bad as well. So I had to get 2 ingrown toenail surgeries while I was at the MTC. So
Arg.
Anyway, so it was kind of funny, but
Yeah.
Did you love MTC basketball? I loved MTC basketball.
yeah, we played knockout every day. So that was a fun aspect for me, was the gym time. So
I had those ingrown toenail surgeries too. I think basketball players get those for some reason.
Yep. The doctor was like, hey, you can either have it now or you're going to have to wait till you're in Ukraine and let me tell you about the hospital situation in Ukraine. So I was like, okay, let's just do it now in America. So
So your miracle didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen.
You did the formula.
Yeah, that's right. So,
Okay. So overall, MTC experience good?
yeah, it was good other than a good amount of guilt and shame.
Yeah. And some
Healthy
get
dose.
sent home if they didn't disclose certain sexual activities pre-mission. That pressure cooker gets people sent home with the same kind of walk of shame that you experienced.
That's right.
But with the real rumors swirling, you know.
And at the time, I didn't disclose 100% everything. That kind of comes in later. But yeah, you know, there's still always that shame, like I'm not good enough. Anyway.
Yeah. Cracks in Nephi's
Yeah, that's right.
veneer.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Okay.
Oh dear.
I'm saying it sort of mockingly. Okay. So how was mission in the Ukraine?
Yeah, so we went to Ukraine right before Christmas.
This is pre-Zelensky probably by many years.
It was, yeah. I think the president at the time was, I don't remember.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's pre-Poroshenko. It's anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, we went right before Christmas time period, so a lot of Christmas trees were up, decorations, things like that. And I remember meeting my mission president, and he's now one of the Quorum of the 70, Jorg Kliebengott. And he's a German. I grew up kind of in a German immersion program school type deal. So I was excited. I was like, this is gonna be cool. I could speak a little bit of German to him and did in the the initial interviews they have with the missionaries and was excited. And, we opened up a new area, that hadn't had missionaries for like 20 years. We couldn't proselytize or wear our name tags or carry books or talk to people for the first like month and a half of my mission because the church wasn't formally registered in this city that I was sent to. And so we would just go to like grocery stores. We go to the rec center. We played basketball with some of the youth in the city, just things to try to meet people. So I remember that being a really fun time on my mission. A lot of sports, a lot of just kind of felt like sightseeing, but also, trying to find areas that we'd eventually teach people. I remember my mission president was very big on physical exercise. So he would tell us that he would wake up at like 5:30 and he would run. And whenever he came to a new area, he would go on runs with the missionaries and just really encourage us to be physically active. And that kind of vibed with me just because that was one of my outlets growing up, going on a run by myself, doing things like that. So I would use exercise as an outlet. As a missionary, I didn't feel like I had a lot of, ways to relieve stress, ways to cope, being with someone 24/7. So I'd kind of use exercise as a stress relief, as a way to cope. Anyway, I remember a time came in my mission where I was still feeling a lot of guilt for earlier undisclosed transgressions. And I remember sitting on a balcony and called my mission president and was like, oh no, I'm probably going to go home. And, it wasn't sex, but, things leading up to that with someone in my previous life. And so I called him and I talked to him and on the phone and he was like, are you sure this is everything? And I kind of told him kind of everything I'd been through. And he's like, okay, you're fine. Like, let's just move past this. So I remember feeling a lot of guilt and shame up to that point. Eventually in my mission, masturbation did come back and I just felt terrible. I was like, no missionary ever masturbates and this is so bad. Like, I'm so terrible. How am I going to teach like this? But once again, I didn't really have any outlet, any ways to cope. And so my mission president was like, okay, we can kind of get this under control. Let me set you up with a mission therapist. And so I believe at the time it was someone in a nearby Russian mission. I think it was an American, but the who went on a mission there is like a therapist for like 4 or 5 missions, something like that. So it was over the phone. But I remember we would have these sessions. I think I met with a lady for a while first and then it switched. But the second gentleman I met with would kind of talk to me. And it was more of like a spiritual counselor rather than like actual counseling. But he would talk about, if you touch yourself, you're letting demons enter your body and you need to really pray that, Satan doesn't get hold of your body and all these kind of like demonic things. And I remember that really messing with like the way I was thinking about myself and about, it was like, oh no, like I'm going to get possessed and I'm, anyway, it was just
so not
like
helpful.
Looking back, I was in a really bad, in a really bad spot. And I remember walking down the street, and you talked about suicidal ideation, and John, you did as well. But I remember walking down the street at times and thinking, man, I could just jump in front of a bus and maybe this would go away and I'd kind of feel better about myself and things. Anyway. So,
wow, so you were feeling really bad.
I did for a good chunk of my mission. Yeah, a couple months in there when it was really bad.
Because you can't, maybe you want to stop.
Yeah, you want to stop.
3 weeks go by, you're
3 weeks,
boy.
5 months go by, you masturbate again, you're kind of the scum of the earth, things like that. And there's really no other outlet on a mission, the only time you can be alone is in the restroom. Some of my companions were great and would go running with me. I loved exercise, and that was a great outlet. And I got to the point where I was exercising in the morning for the morning time and then evening for like an hour before I went to bed, just to try to just cope with stress of a mission. You're talking to people all day. As an introvert, you don't really have a ton of time for introspection other than your morning scripture study, but that's kind of already filled with, reading certain things. And our mission got split, and it became the Lviv mission, which is a city in Western Ukraine. And we had a new mission president, and he was older, and, the mission culture kind of shifted at that point. Just depending on the kind of flavor or, temperature of the mission president, kind of everything changes a little bit. They have new rules, new things like that. And he found out that I don't know if it was just me or if it was other people exercising because of the previous emphasis on, physical health, from the previous mission president, but he ended up shutting down. He's like, only exercise during the 30 minutes in the morning. Don't do it in the evening. It's against the rules. Don't do that. And I was feeling really upset. I was kind of feeling a little bit,
wow,
kind of like I couldn't breathe because I didn't have, an outlet. And so I went to talk to him, and I remember, we were both kind of, I think confrontational during that meeting. But I remember I was like, I want to be healthy. I want to take care of myself. And he's like, you're not here to be healthy. You're here to serve the Lord. And that was so hard to hear. And I just felt so angry after that. It wasn't Monday. That's the only time at that time, serving a mission when you were allowed to email home. But I went to the computer cafe. It was like in Ukraine. We didn't have tablets, iPads at that point. We just had a little Nokia phone. But the only place to use the internet was at like cyber cafes that they'd have around the city. So I remember going with my companion. I was like, we've got to go. I need to send an email. So I sent my dad an email and just kind of told him like, I'm not sure I can take this, things like that. Got an email back from him a little bit like, you got it, like kind of calm down, stuff like that. Like, just do it. It's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that was really hard.
That sounds so hard. That sounds so hard. And I actually have not really thought about if you're introverted, or how that would play out, how difficult that would be within a mission kind of structure. That's such an important point, and needing extroverts too, quite frankly, it's a human need to have some time and space for yourself. But feeling at that point, I so can get a feel for that, of what it's giving you, trying to get your basic needs met. And you're given this such a narrow amount of time. And then it's so expansive and controlled during the day.
That's right.
And extroverted. And then to have it taken away, the feeling of desperation there. And then just really trying to do something healthy, which is go and vocalize your need and concern and advocate for yourself, and have the person be like, yeah, I don't really care about that. That's not really the point. Right?
Totally.
So what did you do from there?
I'm trying to think back. I ended up staying. I think that was, maybe I had like 6 months at that point left in my mission. And you were talking about how maybe it's hard sometimes for an introvert. Our mission culture was very much talk to every single person you pass. Like, if you pass someone and you don't talk to them, you're depriving them of the chance to learn the gospel, and you're kind of robbing that person. And as an introvert, that was also very challenging because, it was hard for me to put myself out there, in a new language, a different culture. People already feel uncomfortable. They think you're the Jehovah's Witnesses a lot. And so to just try to talk to everybody, it was very No, it was scary. It was exhausting, by the end of the day. In our mission, and it kind of changed towards the end, but we didn't have a real culture of eating dinner. We lived in an apartment that was maybe 30 minutes from where we were going to spend most of the day. So it was kind of a hassle to have to go back and eat. But at the same time, it was a little expensive if you were going to eat out or grab something every day. So we kind of had a mission culture of, you just keep teaching, and at 9:30, 10, when it's time to go home, you go home, and then you can eat dinner. I remember, and that's kind of goes back to your needs not being met. But I remember one time I was out tracting with the companion, and I was like, man, I really want to go eat dinner. Let's go eat dinner. And he was like, we could do that, or we could go tract for another couple hours and then you can eat. And that's what we ended up doing. And so, it was just really hard to take care of yourself, physically, but more so mentally, and be a missionary and feel like you're doing, everything you're supposed to do.
Yeah. So, I guess I want to know how, if and how that affected your testimony in your mission, and maybe how your mission ended, or anything else you want to tell about your mission.
Yeah. I don't think it affected my testimony. I think I still was very much a literal believer. A lot of it was directed inwards at me. I can't hack it, all the struggles. I'm sure lots of people feel that way, but I'm not good enough. It ended, I think I had a happy stretch for the last 5 months of my mission. I was with a companion who was, very happy, very outgoing. The last couple areas I was in were pretty happy. We did a lot with members. I guess something else to mention on my mission though. I was in Ukraine when Crimea was attacked by the Russians. And there were demonstrations in the street, government buildings were being ransacked, burned down, destroyed. I remember seeing lines of tanks go by, and I think maybe they told us what was going on, but I don't think I really grasped exactly what was going on at the time. But I don't remember ever feeling scared about it. I remember thinking, I'm on a mission. I'm 100% safe because I'm serving God. Anyway,
you're taking me back a bit, because in Guatemala there was a coup d'état while I was a missionary.
Wow.
And there were tanks and soldiers going through the streets as we're just like tracting. And, as a missionary, you're just like, oh yeah, no big deal. The Lord protects me. I'm good. Right. The Lord blessed Ammon to chop off 200 people's arms.
I'm wearing garments.
I'm wearing garments.
That's right.
I'm good.
The brethren would tell my mission president if we need to leave, so we're safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So overall, how would you say, your mission was for you?
I would say it was a pretty decent experience. I can kind of get into
other than you wanted to die.
Yeah. I guess there were some really dark points. Overall, it was a pretty good experience. I had a lot of childhood trauma growing up. I didn't super get into that. I don't necessarily need to a ton. But it was nice to kind of be on my own. Even though that was on a mission where you're not exactly on your own and everything's kind of constructed, but it was nice to kind of have that separation from my parents. I would say it's a good experience. Met a lot of friends to this day. I loved learning about the Ukrainian, people. It was really cool to see, people would find out, hey, we're here without our moms, we're all by ourselves, and people would just kind of open up and they'd be like, I don't have a lot of food, but here's what I do have, please take it. Just really saw another part of the world and kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things I wouldn't have considered.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. Well, I think Margi will join me, and you've already said this, Margi, how grateful we are, Chris and Mitch, that both of you are willing to share the tougher parts about the mission, because again, it's a major problem facing the Mormon church today. And if we don't talk about it, silence is the enabler, silence is the killer. And if we don't talk about it,
literally,
if we don't talk about it, it's never going to get better. So I think what I want to do is wrap this up, as it's going to be a part 1, and we'll label it something around struggling to complete a Mormon mission, which means that we'll go ahead and wrap up for now at about 2 2 hour, 15 minutes. We'll thank everyone for joining us for part 1. And then we'll say, don't go away. Come right back for part 2. We'll have the very next Mormon Stories episode be about your faith journeys post-mission, and then how your lives came together as brothers-in-law.
That's right.
And then how you supported each other, and then whatever counts, how also that was for other believing members of your mutual extended families, and then how, where you are today, and maybe some tips for believers and non-believers navigating loved ones in a Mormon faith crisis. How does that sound?
Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any final words before we end this episode?
Oh, I think we're good. It's been great to talk about it.
Okay.
Yep.
Margi, any final words? No?
Excited for part 2.
Yeah. I'll just say, if you are a Mormon missionary and you're listening to this, our heart is with you. We love you. No one can tell you what to do. It's not a trivial matter to leave a mission early, and it can be deadly or super unhealthy to stay on a mission when it's not working for you. I would say insist on a licensed, competent therapist who has allegiance to their code of ethics, which is to put your interests over any other biases or values or interests that they have. Insist with your mission president or stake president or parents on a competent, independent, viable therapist. And maybe that's the best advice I can give to you. And make those decisions about medication, about staying or about leaving in consultation with the licensed therapist. That's the best advice I can give. And ultimately, don't allow yourself to feel so trapped that you become hopeless and feel helpless, because that's when the suicidal ideation really starts to creep in, when you feel like there's no hope and you're trapped and you have no options. So you're never trapped. You can just look at these two awesome dudes right here and know that there's happiness and health after a difficult mission.
That's right.
In fact, Chris, in your case, the only time you've experienced severe anxiety and depression was on your mission. Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah, mostly. Okay,
There was
sorry.
one more little flare up, but it was not nearly as bad as the mission. But yeah.
Okay. But I
The worst
mean,
of it.
it gets better.
Oh yeah.
And it's not the end of the world. It'll feel like the end of the
Yep.
world, but it doesn't need to be the end of the world. Although every person's situation is going to be different. So that's my little monologue at the end. You guys okay with that?
It's great.
Anything you want to add?
No, maybe just
Just
Yeah.
there.
I
Yeah.
love it.
That's right. You too.
All right. Well, Margi, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being my co-pilot for this episode. It's always great to have you.
My pleasure.
You're awesome. And Chris and Mitch, thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories. We'll see you back for part 2. How does that sound?
Sounds wonderful.
good.
Thanks,
Looking
John.
forward to it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this part. Come back for part 2. Please know that we need your support to keep this programming alive. So if you want to support us, go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. Follow us on all the social medias. Like us, subscribe to us, follow us, spread the word. But most importantly, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and let's find a way to heal and grow wherever we are in this big, beautiful Mormon and post-Mormon world. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again soon, and we'll see you right back for part 2 of this episode. Take care.